Alright, so you just bought a camera thinking that you'll get awesome pictures straight off the bat. However, the pictures you're taking aren't that much better than the ones you were taking previously, only using your phone. And for the most part, this is just because you need practice. However, it may also be because you don't know much about photography. If you haven't done your research and if you haven't learned your camera basics, then that'll be the main source of your problem. There's a famous photography YouTuber named Mari Hopoya who's had a phrase go viral on the internet which goes like this: learn, make, repeat. Did you notice that the first word here is learn? That's right. Before you go out there and take great pictures, you'll have to learn the art of photography, or the core basics at least. In fact, learning photography is pretty much like learning anything else. For example, if you want to be an architect, you're not gonna straight away start designing the house. No, you're gonna go to school and learn how to design houses in order to design a fully functioning, safe house. Yes, I'm aware that this introduction is getting quite long, so I'm gonna stop rambling on and get straight into it. Now straight away, what I want you to do is pause this video and switch your camera from auto mode to manual mode, because auto mode is not gonna get you nice pictures. Alright, next I'm going to teach you the 3 notions that you need to know in order to start shooting manual. These 3 notions are, what are they? Oh yeah, aperture, shutter speed, and ISO. These 3 things are actually used together in order to assemble a perfectly exposed frame. Combined, they basically make the image brighter or darker when tweaked. Now let's start with the first setting you want to adjust whilst exposing for your picture, and this setting is aperture. Aperture is usually indicated with an F and is usually a very low number on your screen. The most common aperture values go from f1.4 all the way to f22. Some of you may be wondering what aperture actually is. To keep it simple, aperture is the amount of light that your lens lets in to hit the sensor. It is adjusted with the iris situated in the lens. The wider the iris is open, the more light will hit the sensor, therefore the brighter the image will be. Nowadays, you're usually able to adjust the aperture directly from the camera. However, you may need to adjust it from the lens. When you turn the dial located on the top of your camera, you'll see that the number either goes up or down. The smaller the number is, the more light will be left in, and vice versa. The bigger the number is, the less light will come in and hit the sensor. Now, if you've already tested this out yourself, you probably would have noticed that the smaller the aperture is, the less will be in focus. Aperture also determines how much blurriness is in your background and in your foreground. The lower the aperture, the more blurriness you'll get, and the higher the aperture, the less blur you'll get. So when you're shooting, make sure you keep this in mind. So here are a couple values to help you choose the right aperture in the right moment. So for landscapes, you want your aperture to be anywhere from f8 to f11 to keep everything in nice focus. For portraits and sports, however, you'll probably want your aperture to be quite a bit lower, anywhere from f1.4 to f4. Now that you've set your aperture, your image still might be too bright or too dark. So the next thing you'll want to do is adjust your shutter speed. Shutter speed is how long your shutter will be open when it's taking the picture. When your shutter speed is at 1/125th of a second, for example, it means that the shutter is open for 1/125th of a second. Once again, the smaller the number is, the brighter the image will be. Now, because shutter speed represents the amount of time that your shutter is open for whilst taking the picture, it means that the longer it's open, the more will happen in the frame. This is why your pictures are sometimes blurry. For example, if you're taking a picture with your phone and your shutter speed is set to 1/8 of a second, it means that you have to be 100% stable for 1/8 of a second, which usually is not the case, resulting in a blurry image. Not only do you have to be stable, your subject does as well. If you or your subject is not stable, that will result in blurriness. Now, if you want motion blur in your image for artistic reasons, like in this waterfall shot, for example, go for it. However, if you don't want motion blur in your image, you'll want to raise that shutter speed value. This is why sports photographers, for example, always shoot with a very high shutter speed of 1000 or above. Finally, as a last result, if your image is still too bright or still too dark, you'll now want to adjust your ISO. ISO is basically fake light that you implement into your image. The higher the ISO, the more light you'll get into your image. However, the more digital grain you'll also get in your image. And because digital grain is not something you'll usually want in your image, you'll usually want a lower ISO. While setting up for shots, I'll always recommend you start with a baseline ISO of 100 and only change your ISO if you really don't have any other option. Right now I'm on ISO 100, the shot is nicely exposed, there's no digital grain, and it is quite sharp. Now my ISO is set to 6400. And that is no bueno, because right now, as you can probably see, I'm very soft and there is a lot of digital grain in my image. So yeah, just try to keep your ISO as low as possible and try not to touch that setting. Alright, after watching this video, you probably know the 3 basic settings of shooting manual, and you can now go out and take pictures. Beware though, because these are only the core basics of photography. Don't go out in the street saying that you're a photography guru only because you know what ISO, aperture, and shutter speed is. Hopefully you've enjoyed this video and hopefully you've learned something. I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye bye. Well done.